really
to our
good.
project.
It's about 2020, you know? 2020 was a mess
video.
and a whirlwind of emotions, and so are our cupcakes. You don't want to know.
You don't want to know the story.
But
They're
it shows
representative.
that crazy things can have good outcomes. Let's take a look at the good and the bad of 2020 and the years before and after. Here we go! Let's go!
Question of the day is cupcakes. Our first topic is to cover the deadly virus that turned the world upside down. This is COVID-19.
Started in December 2019 and has been an ongoing problem ever since. The first case was in Wuhan, China, and it was confirmed as a national threat in March 2020.
There have been about 160 million worldwide cases and about 3.3 million worldwide deaths. In America, there have been about 32 million cases and about 581,000 deaths.
This caused economic downfall, millions of lost jobs, and much more. Schools, stores, and entertainment facilities were temporarily shut down for at least 2 months. And people struggled mentally, financially, and physically, and were unsure of what was
Our former President Donald Trump, who had controversial opinions about COVID-19 and handled it in a skeptical way, including not wearing a mask, holding mass rallies where there was no acknowledgement to COVID guidelines, etc. He also pushed his supporters to follow in his footsteps, resulting in people not wearing masks and not following CDC guidelines.
Lots of states set to reopen during the summer, while cases stay mostly low due to people being outside and the humidity in the air, minimizing the transmission of COVID-19.
In the fall, many schools had plans to reopen safely and in person, but in some places, cases surged and closed a lot of places, including schools, to close back down.
In November, when President Joe Biden was elected, lots of people in America gained hope that we might be done with this awful virus after having to deal with it for a year.
Shutting down the virus and reopening the country is not as easy as it
December
might seem.
2020, a full year later, we regained hope when the news of the first COVID vaccine broke out. The first person to receive one of our 4 main COVID vaccines was Sandra Lindsay, a nurse and resident of New York City who received the Moderna
There
vaccine.
are 3 main vaccines at the moment: the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, and the Johnson & Johnson. These have all been approved by the CDC and gone through many
Today,
tests.
over 32% of the population has been fully vaccinated, and 45% being half vaccinated, which means only taking 1 of the 2 shots required.
During the initial quarantine, kids were bored and downloaded an app that is now the #1 social media app in the world. This app is TikTok, and it is not only an app to make dances, but you can also laugh with your friends. It is also used to talk a lot about politics. There were hashtags that were used to spread information about the election. This also allowed children who otherwise probably would not know much about politics to learn and start forming informational...
Immigration in the U.S. has been a controversial topic since the beginning of time. With America being land of the free, immigrants from all over the world wanted to start a better life. In past centuries, there were many more European immigrants coming during times of hardship in their countries, searching for the American dream. 2020 statistics say that most of the immigrants coming today are from Mexico and Asia. In past centuries, laws for these immigrants have become tighter, making it harder for families to start a new life together in America. There have been new laws such as the public charge law that made it more of an administrative burden on visa applicants, or DACA, which allowed more than 700,000 young people brought to the United States as children to continue to live and work lawfully. But 1 month into it, problems arose and they stopped taking applicants. The program was later restored in December. Other things have also made it hard for immigrants, such as COVID, the presidential election, and new requirements for visa applicants. This has become an issue. Although deportation rates were at an all-time low under the Trump administration, it is still an issue.
In the past 60 years, the world has learned more and more about the national emergency that is global warming. 2020 has been the warmest year ever recorded, and the global temperature has gone up 2 degrees since 1800. Many items we use in everyday life causes these temperatures to rise, such as burning fossil fuels. Ways we do this is by driving cars, going on airplanes, heating our homes, and many more. The Earth's temperature heats up when these fossil fuels are being trapped in the atmosphere. This causes many problems, but one that is specific to 2020 is the record amount of fires on the Earth. In 2020, the Australian fires were at their worst, and it ruined a good amount of Australia's land. This past summer was known as the Black Summer. As of March 2020, the fires burnt 46 million acres, killing nearly 3 billion land animals and causing many to go extinct. Fortunately, the fires have come to a slow and dreary end, but Australia is still getting built back to what it once was.
Systemic racism has been a huge problem in the world for many years. Systemic racism is everywhere, even in preschools. Black students are much more likely to be suspended from preschool than white students. People of color face barriers to success every single day. Black students also face problems in taking in on more debt than white students to go to college. Black students are twice as likely as white students to be unemployed. Black students who earn degrees in high-demand areas such as engineering face challenges like how 10% of black engineering graduates are unemployed compared to the 6% of all engineering graduates. Racial bias affect negotiations over starting pay, future wages, etc. Identifying and implementing effective strategies in American society should be made a national priority. While talking about women's rights and looking back on feminism in years in the past, many people could say each year individually was a pretty big year for growth or for setbacks. So let's look back on what happened in 2020 for women's rights. And on September 18th in 2020, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died at the age of 87, which was a huge deal for a lot of people. As many of you probably know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a Supreme Court justice and a huge leading force for women's rights in a very famous case, Roe versus Wade. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of the leading forces in getting women's rights, abortion rights, and has been constantly fighting for women. There was also a movement called the Me Too movement, and this is a movement for women who had been sexually assaulted or abused in the past coming out and speaking about their story and speaking their truth. And this has been a really big deal, and thousands and millions of women get sexually assaulted, and a lot of them are too scared to say anything. If they say anything, they are told that they're lying, and it's a lot of times not a safe environment for them to say something. So this movement was all about women speaking out and taking their power. The Me Too movement started in 2006, but has been recently coming to light again because 2020 was definitely a year of surprises, and a lot of women had a safe environment where they could come out about their story and their abuser. And this also relates to the USA gymnastics scandal, where a USA gymnastics team doctor, Larry Nassar, was accused of sexually assaulting over 300 young girls and women. Many very famous gymnasts like Simone Biles, Gabby Douglas have come out saying that Larry Nassar sexually assaulted them, and there were many male workers in the industry that were doing the same thing. Some highlights from 2020 in women's rights are: we elected our first female vice president, as most of you probably know, Kamala Harris, and she's currently serving. Some soccer teams in different countries like Sierra Leone or Brazil are starting to have equal pay for their women and men soccer players. So that's a really big step in the equal pay fight. Another good thing that's happened in 2020 for women's rights is countries like Scotland are starting to make all period products free, which has been an ongoing problem for women who are less privileged or homeless. If you can't afford basic tampons or pads, it could be a really big problem to take care of yourself and stay clean. So that's good.
This past year had been one of the most interesting and chaotic elections ever. The final candidates were Joe Biden for the Democrat Party and Donald Trump for the Republican Party. Joe Biden made American history when he nominated Kamala Harris to be his first woman and person of color to be his vice president. Leading up to the election, there were a couple of debates, and the first one between Biden and Trump was so childish and immature that they had to mute the mics in the following debate. On November 13, 2020, days after the initial election, it had been confirmed that Biden and Harris won the election, but Trump refused to accept the results. Trump then went on to pay millions of dollars of more money to recount the vote, claiming there was voter fraud. He then only figured out that Biden actually won by a lot more than they showed on the original sheet. Trump continued to deny the results, but Biden was sworn in on Inauguration Day on January 20th, 2021. Trump did not attend the inauguration, being the first president ever to not attend the next one. Trump made very controversial and interesting decisions in his 4 years of being president. One of the major things he got pushback was how he handled the Black Lives Matter movement.
Racism has been a recurring theme since the founding of America. Since March, people all over have become more aware of racial injustices. In 2013, the Black Lives Matter took off after the death of Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin was an innocent 17-year-old kid who was murdered by George Zimmerman. His case brings up issues such as racial profiling, gun control laws, and white privilege. Martin was walking through a gated community late at night to reach home when Zimmerman saw him and saw him as a threat. Zimmerman called the police, and the police told him to do nothing, but Zimmerman didn't listen and approached the 17-year-old. The interaction ended in a scuffle between the two, and Trayvon shot dead. Since there were no witnesses, many details of the story are blurry. Zimmerman got tried for manslaughter, but at the end of it, he was found not guilty. The outcome of his case was a low blow to many people. The privilege was there, and it was obvious. The life of a 17-year-old was taken away, and there were no consequences. After his case, the Black Lives Matter campaign was co-founded by 3 black women, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. The campaign continued on and gained traction quickly. Today, the movement helped to lead the protests in March against police brutality and the killing of George Floyd. George Floyd was killed by police officer Derek Chauvin. Chauvin held his knee to Floyd's neck for 9 minutes until he died. The incident was caught on camera, but Chauvin's trial had a different outcome than Zimmerman's. He was convicted as guilty. U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the nation following the verdict, saying, "It's a moment of significant change," but added, "It's not enough. We can't stop here. We're going to deliver the real change and reform."
Extremely wealthy
Racism has
financiers
been a
with
recurring
connections
theme since
to
the founding of America.
celebrities,
Since March,
politicians,
people
royals,
all over have
etc.,
become more aware of
including
racial
Donald
injustices.
Trump, Bill Clinton,
In
and
2013,
Prince
the
Andrew.
Black Lives Matter
He was
took off
arrested in
after the
July
death of Trayvon Martin.
2019 with charges
Trayvon
of
Martin
sex
was an innocent
His
17-year-old kid
ex-girlfriend
who
and
was murdered
longtime
by George
associate,
Zimmerman. His case brings up issues such as
Maxwell,
racial
was arrested
profiling,
on
gun control
charges
laws,
relating
and white
to
privilege.
Epstein's sex trafficking
Martin was
operation.
walking through a gated community late at night
Epstein
to
died
reach
in
home
jail,
when Zimmerman saw
and
him
his
and
death
saw him
was
as a
ruled a
threat.
suicide by the New York Medical
Zimmerman called the
Examiner.
police, and the police told
However,
him to
there
do
is debate
nothing.
on whether or
But
not he
Zimmerman
killed
didn't
himself
listen
or if
and
someone
approached the
was hired
17-year-old.
inside the jail.
The interaction ended in
He
a
was a
scuffle between
disgusting
the
predator
two,
who
and
raped and
Trayvon shot
assaulted
dead.
minors.
Since
This
there were
connects
no
to modern
witnesses,
day
many details of
feminism.
the story
And
are
a
blurry.
recent study that
Zimmerman
showed
got tried
97% of women over 18
manslaughter,
have been sexually
but at the
assaulted,
end of it, he
raped,
was
harassed
found
online,
not guilty.
or
The outcome of his case
something
was a
along
low
those
blow to many people.
lines.
The privilege
Epstein
was
a
there, and it
privileged,
was
wealthy,
obvious.
and powerful
The life of a
person
17-year-old
who
was
committed
taken
very
away,
serious
and there were
crimes.
no
In
consequences.
2019,
After
many
his
powerful
case,
and
the Black
wealthy
Lives Matter
people
campaign
like
was
Lori
co-founded
Loughlin,
by 3 black
Felicity
women, Alicia
Huffman,
Garza,
and more
Patrisse
were
Cullors, and
arrested
Opal
for the college
Tometi.
admissions scandal.
The campaign
The college
continued
admissions
on and
scandal
gained
was
traction
when wealthy
quickly.
parents,
Today,
including
the
lots of
movement helped to
celebrities,
lead the
were arrested,
protests in March
paying
against
lots
police
of money to
brutality and the
colleges
killing
that
of George Floyd.
didn't admit
George
their
Floyd was
children
killed by
without it.
police officer
They also
Derek
might
Chauvin.
have someone else
Chauvin
take their
held his
kids'
knee to
SATs so
Floyd's
they
neck
get
for
better
9
scores.
minutes until he died.
Loughlin, probably the most
The
well-known
incident
face
was
of the
caught on
scandal,
camera,
paid
but Chauvin's
$500K to
trial
get
had a
her
different
daughter
outcome
Olivia
than
Jade
Zimmerman's. He was
admitted to
convicted as
USC as a
guilty.
recruit.
U.S.
She's a
President
prime
Joe Biden
example
addressed
of
the
white
nation
privilege.
following the verdict,
She
saying,
committed a
"It's a
federal
moment of significant
crime and
change,"
only served
but
about
added, "It's
one-third
not
amount
enough.
of
We
the
can't
time a
stop
normal
here.
person
We're
would."
going to deliver
She is
real change
privileged and
reform."
unliked by the people who are fighting for their lives at the border. She is living normally.
Since March, people all over have become more aware of racial injustices. In 2013,
Celebrities,
the Black Lives Matter
politicians,
took off
royals,
after the
etc.,
death of Trayvon
including
Martin.
Donald Trump,
Trayvon
Bill
Martin was an
Clinton,
innocent
and Prince
17-year-old
Andrew.
kid who
He
was murdered
arrested
by
in
George
July
Zimmerman.
2019
His
with
case brings
charges
up
of
issues
sex
such as
trafficking.
racial
His
profiling, gun
ex-girlfriend and
control
longtime
laws, and white
associate,
privilege.
Jolene
Martin was walking through a
Maxwell
gated
was
community
arrested
late
on
at night
charges
to
relating
reach
to
home when
Epstein's
Zimmerman
sex
saw him
trafficking
and saw him as a
operation.
threat. Zimmerman called the
Epstein
police,
died in
and the
jail,
police told him to do
and
nothing.
his death was
But
ruled a
Zimmerman
suicide
didn't
by the
listen
New
and
York
approached the
Medical
17-year-old. The
However,
interaction
there is
ended in a
debate on
scuffle
whether or
between
not
the
he
two,
killed
and
himself or
Trayvon
if
shot
someone was
dead.
hired inside
Since
the
there were
jail.
no witnesses, many details
He
of
was
the
a
story are
disgusting
blurry.
predator who raped
Zimmerman
and
got
assaulted
tried
minors.
for
This connects to modern day
manslaughter, but at the
feminism.
end of
A
it, he
recent
was
study that
found
showed
not guilty.
97%
The
of
outcome
women
of his
over
case was a
18 have
low
been
blow to
sexually
many
assaulted,
people.
raped,
The privilege was
harassed
there, and it was
online,
obvious.
or
The life of a
something
17-year-old
along
was
those
taken away,
lines.
and there were no
Epstein was a
consequences.
privileged, wealthy,
After
and
his case,
powerful
the Black Lives
person
Matter
who committed
campaign
very
was
serious
co-founded by
crimes.
3 black women.